I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode.
That's perfect.
Oh, I guess I should ask, do you have any questions before I get started?
No,
you're an old pro at this.
Okay. I'm good. Thank you, though, for asking.
So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Michelle. I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I can't wait for our conversation. It's going to be pretty amazing.
So I know a lot of people, that are going to look you up are going to be like, okay, great. She's got, successful businesses, a healthy family. She's loving life. Perfect for her. But, here I am like struggling and in a deep hole. So can you tell us a little bit about how it wasn't all roses and champagne?
Yeah. Yes, I can. I get that a lot. Like, the people who are like, oh, your social media looks so great. And oh, you're so successful. And, one, thank you. But two, my life has definitely not been champagne, butterflies, roses, any of those things. I mean, just in full transparency, and you don't even know this, before I got in this interview today, I was at the hospital doing medical tests and stuff like that because my body doesn't tend to work the way that a typical human being's does. So, that's kind of my daily life of different things like that. But, while I was building my businesses, I was juggling 2 extremely medically complicated children who unfortunately inherited my system and unfortunately not my husband's medical system. So, I started off working in corporate thinking I kind of could do it all, be it all, have it all. And then the day came that my oldest son had a seizure in my arms, and it had been a really rough pregnancy, rough year and a half with him, postpartum depression, suicidal thoughts, tons of crap, but I was looking really good on the surface, running, PayPal Europe's operations in the corporate world. And, he turned out to have a ton of stuff wrong. And then my second one was born and he was kind of like, hold my beer. You thought that one was rough. Like, here I come.
Let me show you what you can handle.
Exactly. I just remember, like, I say this story over and over again. I always remind my husband, like, thank God I was drugged up in that hospital. I'm like, because when the doctor came in and just rattled off, because he had a litany of things wrong with his heart, and he was born 3 weeks early at 10 pounds. So pretty big kid. I had all sorts of complications. So when the doctor came in and just was like, there's something up with his heart, which is the words you don't want to hear in general. And then just all these scientific terms, like I just spaced right out because we had already been through hell with the other one. And in my head, I'm thinking like, I was already trying to figure out how I'm doing like my job I was doing, plus 2 kids, plus, everything else. And it just got more and more complicated and complex from there. So, and then we had just gotten him somewhat medically, stable because it turned out he had a lot of breathing issues. So blue spells and back and forth to ERs. And, that in addition to the other one who was also aspirating thin liquids into his lungs and all sorts of complications. It turns out that my group had been outsourced at my corporate job. So, that rug was pulled out from underneath me because I was no longer with the job. So, I had a choice at that moment. And I tell a lot of people, I could deal with my kids being super sick. I could deal with like that level of crazy. But for some reason, like my identity was so wrapped up in my corporate life that like they pulled that rug and I lost my shit. Like I didn't know what end was up, but I had a choice to make. I could have turned around and jumped into a very similar position, or I could jump into entrepreneurship. And I didn't really recognize myself at that time. I'd been through a lot of different iterations. I grew up in a household where, adapting your personality, because it was an addiction situation, adapting your personality was survival for that given moment. So I'd done a lot of that over the years, and I didn't really know who I was anymore. So I decided to do entrepreneurship, which worked out pretty well so far, knock on wood. But it was not without its difficulties. I mean, I was still juggling two extremely sick kids while building two different businesses. Some people will look at that and say, you must have been insane. No, but a little bit, yes, entrepreneurship. I feel like there takes a little bit of insanity, but also, I got really good at understanding fully, my priorities. Right? Because I think that too. Like if you only have an inch worth of time to get your shit done, you are very finite and like laser focused on what needs to get done. And it doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean that like there weren't days where I was crying my eyes out, and there still are. Because I think little did I know that my body, I got my kids good, they were all good. And then, my body, I had multiple autoimmune diseases diagnosed. I had something removed from my body with some tumors on it. I had so many things, and I'm still going. So, I caution folks all the time of, don't you dare just judge off social media, because that's the final performance, guys, and I don't want anybody out there thinking like, well, she's got it all together. Because I'll guarantee by the crying I was doing this morning, I don't fucking have it all together. Guarantee you.
Well, and I think that's just it. Too many people just rely on, all that they see, and then they assume that's all there is to see. And meanwhile, it's like, no, that's all I'm letting you see.
Exactly.
So when you decided like, okay, that's it, I'm going to become an entrepreneur, of course, coming from the corporate world, what was the one thing that you remember that you were kind of like, oh, this is surprising?
I think that's a hard question, because there's a lot of things I feel like along the way. I mean, although I knew it would be hard, I think there was somewhat of a surprising level of just how hard. Right. And also coupled with that, I'm usually pretty hard on myself. I'm the hardest one with the judgment. So shutting those down, like those voices, in order to keep going as an entrepreneur can be the most challenging thing I've encountered. I am my own biggest challenger. Getting funding, obviously a challenge, securing clients, challenges. But, when you are faced with you as your business, that is one big mind fuck, for lack of a better term. Like it really can be. So for me, like that has been something that has been really challenging, is like, oh, I can't do these external validations of, oh, you're doing so good. No, you need to know you're doing good in order to keep the business going. It's not necessarily just seeking for the external validation. Does that make sense?
Yep. And so what are some of the things that you found that work, and still to this day work really well for you doing to try to, because I think everybody, especially right now, is going through a lot more of those voices of going, am I on the right path? Especially when you first start out. And then I know even I experience it, the older I get, then you're like, okay, what am I doing now? What do I want to be when I grow up again?
Exactly. I mean, I think, I was blessed that I went into it with the marathon, not a sprint mentality. And I think I did that out of the gate to give myself a little breathing room to know, like, you were only going to perform at the level that you were able to perform in this chapter in life, right? Because I have little ones, right? So I went in and I said, okay, you're not making $1 million. This is going to, like, right out of the gate, this is going to take a while. So number one, get your expectations in check. Understand the chapter of life in which you are in, as well as what your priorities are in that chapter, because your version of success or your priorities may not look like the person to your left or your right. So I would, as long as I am clear on my priorities at this moment, then, I don't need to keep up with the Joneses. I don't need to, succeed in the way that so-and-so succeeds. I succeed in my way. And that's the biggest thing. And when that doesn't work for me, I tell clients this a lot, and I use it myself because it was told to me, is any of that negative crap that comes back, I simply ask, is it true? And I do my best to speak in facts. So if I hear, my itty bitty shitty committee, or whatever you want to call it, in your head saying like, you suck, you're going to fail at this, I simply ask myself, like, is it true? Have you failed in the past? What does the evidence point toward? And is there always a fear of failing? There is always going to be too.
Yeah.
So, and that's okay. That's all right.
Well, and I think that failure is something that you need, like, and I
Mhm.
always think of that in every aspect of life, like,
Yes.
because I remember sitting there and, I always think of like hearing on the radio, like, Jack and Jim have been together for 80 years and never fought. And I'm like, then they don't
Fuck
talk to
you.
each other.
Exactly.
Like, then they are not saying a word to each other. Cause I think
Exactly.
I'm at, fight 2,656 and we're still in the honeymoon suite. What's going on? Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's the bill of goods that we've been sold is just not okay, right? I
Yeah.
think, and that was one of the biggest realizations I had with my kids, right? Because everyone sells you that like parenthood is amazing and your motherhood and all this stuff. And mine was hell when it first started. Like the level of postpartum and the craziness that went on, like I was pissed off for a while. I was like, all of you told me this was going to be this beautiful, miraculous thing. And it was on some levels, but it's a mixed bag. And
Right.
then I slowly, came to grips with the fact of all of life is a mixed bag. And you can't have the good without the bad. So you just have to accept that. And it makes it a little bit easier to swallow when you're going through the hell, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think I think that that's where a lot of people get stuck, right? Is they
Mm-hmm.
have this idea or this vision in their head of this is exactly what it's going to be like. And I always
Yeah.
think of like the person who's like, I'm going to open a bar and it's going to be awesome. And it's going to be like cheers. And I'm going to be like serving people. And I'm going to be like, no, you're going to be cleaning up puke and getting rid of
Exactly.
drunk people all night.
Exactly.
That's what your life is going to be like. You need to rethink this.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. I actually worked for a guy when I was right out of college who, sold a tech company, like made a shit ton of money and decided exactly what you just said. He was going to buy a bar. And I was the bartender there. And when I say it was the biggest disaster, just from a liability perspective, like me, the business hat, like looking back, I was like, whoa, because it was exactly what you just said.
yeah.
It was people, he was over serving, he was drunk because he didn't understand that it was a business. There's certain mentality that you have to take when you're going into situations of business.
Yeah. And I think, right now I want to talk a little bit about, what you now do for people, because I think
Yeah.
there's so many people that are sort of feeling like they're at a crossroads right now. So let's talk a little bit about the
Yeah.
services that you offer right now.
Yeah, I mean, with the title, I'm a business strategist, right? And a lot of people are like, well, what the hell does that mean? Because there's business coaches everywhere you turn nowadays. And then I also host, the Resilient Entrepreneur podcast, which is, where I get to kind of dig into the emotions of the hard stuff that people go through. But part of the coaching approach that I take, coaching and consulting, depending on the client, is that, we're crafting how you want things to look, good, bad, ugly, whatever it may be, from the point in which you are at right now. Because to your point, there's a lot of people right now who have lost their businesses, who don't know if this is the right time to be in their business, or trying to deal with a lot of competing priorities. So what ends up happening is we lay it all out. I'm not big on saying, are you just a business or just a life coach? Because they go together.
Yeah.
So especially, I mean, I mainly work with a lot of females, and we tend to view it as a whole, a whole package. Like I can't make a ton of work meetings and a ton of work plans without considering the fact that my kids exist.
Yeah.
That's just not the way. And as well as looking realistically, which is what I help a lot of people to do as well, at the world around me. It's just good business.
Well, and I think, I always hated the saying like, leave your work at the door. I mean, now I think most people are like, well, what door?
Door.
Which door do you want me to leave it at? But I think to me, that was always like, it always rubbed me the wrong way, because I thought
Yes.
that's like absolutely impossible to do, to leave
Yeah.
any part of my life, because I think so much, like you said, so much of my personal life affects how I do my business, when I do my business. And
Yeah.
I remember, being stuck in, because I was like you, I started off in the corporate world. So I was stuck in that 9 to 5 mentality. And
Yeah.
then I was like shitting on myself so much, because I was like, I can't get this stuff done. And then I realized that I liked really to work at night. When my son was
Me too.
first born, I'd put him to bed at like 8 o'clock. And then that's when I worked. And I was like, why do I have such a skewed view of
Yes,
when work needs to get done? Like, so I started looking more at deadlines and just going, I need to have it done by this time. I don't care
exactly.
when I do it, as long as it's done, on time. So what are some of the strategies that, that you use or that you teach on to help people kind of even just finding themselves on track? Because I think people are getting lost
They
in,
are.
their schedules and time management.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things I teach is what you just described right there. Like, it's not about the window of time in which you do it. It's about, I'm running a coaching group right now where I'm working with them on, Sunday nights is a brain dump of every single to do you have to do for that entire week, personal and professional. And then you can take those and assign them to slots throughout your week. But you have 24 hours in a day and you're sleeping maybe, hopefully, 7 or 8 of them. That leaves a lot of hours left. So therefore, where are you squandering time? Where are you scrolling on your phone for an hour and a half when you could be working? Where are you giving quality time to your kids or your families or your fur babies or whoever? Or are you just like giving them half of you because you're split in too many different directions? So it all comes down to kind of that intentionality that you are setting when you're moving forward into your week. But I'm a big fan of planning holistically across all the tasks, because then you can put your CEO hat on better that way. You can be the CEO of your entire life and say, okay, let me move this to make this better, or this or this. And then you can also reassess everything holistically as well when you have actually, understand what you're doing in totality.
Right. And I know on your website you have a really great resource for like a monthly look back, which I was looking at it and I was
Yeah.
like, I used to do these all the time.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I tell people to do these all the
Yeah.
time. Like the mechanic who
Yep.
has a really bad car, right? But
Exactly.
I think, let's talk a little bit about the importance of actually looking at that,
Yes.
like looking back, because I think sometimes what happens, and, I just had this conversation with a client where I was like, hey, you need to celebrate yourself. Your inbox has been under 20 emails for like a week. And she
Yeah.
was like, you want me to celebrate that? I'm like, yeah,
Yes.
usually you
Yes, you
have
do.
156
Yeah.
emails every day in
Yeah.
your inbox. This is a huge accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the techniques that you teach on why, like, well, first talk about why it's important and then just an idea of how people can start doing that. Cause I think some people are like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. I mean, on an individual level, when I'm coaching individually with people in a one-on-one session, every session starts with their wins. I asked them right out of the gate. And I had one client who was like, at first it really bothered me because you kept asking me, anything else? Do you have any other wins? Do you have any other wins? She's like, and I felt really less than, like I had to have like 5 more. And I was like, well, that's not my intention. My intention is to get you to see them as you go through the week, because to your point, we're usually pretty good at seeing the shit that we're lacking at or that we're not doing, but we're not hunting out the things that we are doing well. So that's kind of, in an individual coaching manner. The way that I teach kind of time management and planning is somewhat of a waterfall effect. So, you have your big old year goal, whatever you want to do for revenue, but then, you break it down into quarters and then months and then weeks and then days. And for me, I'm always doing a monthly review, when I can, which is quite often, thank goodness, because it keeps me sane. But then also I'm doing a quarterly review, because if you're not reviewing it often enough, you don't know what you've missed. You tend to roll things over too. If you have a to-do list and you have the same 3 things never getting done, there's a reason. And if you're not reviewing it, you can't say, okay, why are these not getting done? Do I just not want to fucking do them? Am I avoiding them? Are they too hard and I need to ask for help? So you really aren't able to really strategically plan for your business if you're just kind of catching as catch can as you go through. So those are kind of my biggest things. And then to your point, if you understand what was on the list and what you're actually doing, you can celebrate when you do it and be realistic about what you're doing. Because I think there's quite a few women who will come to me, and I'm sure you've said this, and I've said it to people before too, like, I feel so lazy. Oh, I'm not getting anything done. And the first thing I say to them is, I want you to log every single fucking thing that you've done for the next 2 days. And they come back to me and they're like, holy crap. And I'm like, yeah, you are. You just, maybe it's not the stuff that you want to get done. Maybe you're just on autopilot throwing 5 loads of laundry in. So you don't realize that that is actually taking time up. You have to acknowledge everything and put everything kind of on the game board so you know what you're doing.
Well, and I think it's important to keep those, sheets. And and I know you said it, I just can't
Mhm.
remember exactly where I heard it, but of like going back and like looking at them, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, I found an old notebook of when I started my first business in like, I think the date on the page was like 1999. That tells you how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, want to have 6 clients, like exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. And there was like hearts and
Underline.
stickers and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. And I was like, oh, that poor little girl. Like, but I was like, this is amazing that at that time, that was like such a huge accomplishment to me.
Yeah.
And now I'm finding myself going, I wish I only had 6
I know.
clients. Like, I really
I
need to cut
know.
back. But I think like going back and reviewing that is so important because it helped me to realize how far I'd come. Because, of course,
Yes.
along the journey, I wasn't thinking of that. It was always like, okay, next goal, next goal. And I
Yeah.
wasn't taking the
Yeah.
time to look back on previous goals and going, gosh, remember when that was such a big thing to accomplish?
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think there's a quote, I don't remember who said it, that was like, it's not about becoming a millionaire, it's the journey to become a millionaire. So I think oftentimes we're so focused on the millionaire that we forget all the cool stuff that we're doing along the way. And we forget to kind of pat ourselves on the back. I mean, I'm 100%, guilty of this, where somebody actually congratulated me on something yesterday. And I was like, what now? Huh? Because I'm so far ahead and I'm already planning 3 months from now. So to me, that's in my rear view. But I think, that was a good reminder to me of you need to presence yourself in this stuff, like, and actually say, holy shit, I did that. And I think it also keeps you in a good place, to remind you of like that hopeful girl, like you just described, like when you were like 6 clients, I can do it,
Yeah.
instead of just like, oh, fuck, 6 clients. Like, I think there has to be a sweet spot between, putting that CEO hat on and doing the business of the business, but still keeping that level of hope and inspiration and fire, that got you through from the beginning. There has to be a sweet spot between those two.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of times people, like you had said before, there's so many people out there that are like coaches and consultants, and we
Yeah.
hear it all the time. And I know I throw it around.
Yep.
I
Yep.
do that as well. But I think there's a lot of people that are out there that, are going, I am so stuck. I feel so lost that I don't even know how I would start with someone, because if they ask me a question like, what is your goal? I don't even
Yeah.
know how to answer that, because literally
Yeah.
my goal is to just survive until the end of the day and not kill any humans. Like
Yeah. And you know what?
that's my accomplishment.
That's okay. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's amazing to me how many clients I will say, like, what does success look like for you? What do you want to do with yourself? What makes you happy? What brings you joy? And I get blank stares. So, I think when you are feeling that, when you are having those days where it's like, look, I'm just cool if I wake up and I get out of bed and I function, like that may be the chapter of life that you're in. And that's okay, as long as you don't stay there. I think there's something to be said about, giving yourself the grace and space, but also adding in the accountability factor. Because yes, number one, it takes courage sometimes just to wake up and keep going. But if you stay there, then that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. So for people that are sitting there that are sort of thinking like, so what can somebody do for me when I'm at that situation? Or how do I even start that conversation? How do I even look for somebody? What are some of the key things that people should look for when they're like,
Yeah.
okay, I need some help. I know that, I need help in, this avenue. Or like if someone's just like, look, I just need help. I don't know
Yeah.
where, I don't know
Period.
when, I don't know
Yeah.
how, but somebody
Yeah. I mean,
save me.
I think first and foremost, you need to be very cautious of the people who have all the answers. Number one, right? I've seen a lot of coaches out there do X, Y, and Z and make $1 million. Do this and this will happen. And when you're in a vulnerable state where you're lacking the motivation and you're struggling, you want to look at those and they're like shiny object. And it's like, if I can only accomplish this, I will have made it, which is great. But you can take all the classes, you can pay all the money, but if you are not mentally ready to change and you are not, you don't have that light in yourself, you're going to spend a lot of money and you're not going to really make that impact that you want. So, I think first and foremost is seeking out somebody who understands where you are and understands that level. Like I remember what it was like to, not understand how I was paying the bills. I remember robbing Peter to pay Paul to buy groceries. I remember that stuff. And that actually kind of keeps me humble as a coach, but also pushing people to move forward. And I think also just on just a personal level too, you need to be really keep careful of the people around you as well. I mean, you and I both know that, there is something to be said that you're a reflection of those 5 people that you're around. So if you are around people who are not champions of yours, if you are around people who you go to them and you're like, I'm having a really tough time. And they're like, oh, well, the time I had a tough time was blah, 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 and they're not just willing to hold space for you without judgment, without, interjecting themselves into the situation, then it may be time to find new people. And I think that sometimes I find where I come in as a coach too, is that I just hold space. A lot of the times, I mean, I can sit and I can interject. I can tell you how to increase your bottom line. I can do a lot of things, but sometimes people just need somebody to hold space for them and to tell them this shit's hard, but you can still do it anyway.
Well, and I think, and tell me what you think about this, but I think the key too is that some people will look for coaches because they want somebody to do the work, right? They're like,
Yes,
this is where I want to be.
Absolutely.
Just give me just tell me
Yes.
1, 2, 3, and then let me tick it off and then I'll be successful. But not really realizing that when you're looking for this, you're the one who has to do the work.
Yes.
Or it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the difference, but you just explained the difference between coaching and consulting, right? Coaching is bring the horse to water. Consulting is telling them how to drink, essentially. And I mean, I can do both, and I've done both for clients. However, I will tell you how to do it if I know you are also able to maintain it for the long term. If I tell you how to do step 1, 2, and 3, and great, you did it in this instance and you got some success, high five, good job. However, if you do not have the discipline mentally and even on some cases, if you don't feel worthy of doing it, you're not going to maintain it beyond our coaching contract. And then you're going to end up right back to square one. It's similar to how when people win the lottery, they get millions, then they, boom, lose it.
Yeah.
So I can tell you how to drink all day long, but if you haven't done the work, then it's not going to last.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, I love that analogy because I think it's so true. And being from, a financial background, I've always dealt with that with businesses of saying, you need to know what it's really going to be like when you're, when it's down and dirty. Right. And I've always understood that because I was, have been in the same boat. Like you had said, there have been times where, I found it so, amusing in hindsight that here I was, doing the books for multi-million dollars companies and everything was going smoothly and I was running it and the bills were being paid and I had payroll and all of this stuff was coming out and I mean, it was all smooth, but then I would sit at home and I was getting, this is a disconnection notice. You're going to be shut off, cell phone things calling. And I'm like, I don't this is
where's
horrible.
The disconnect?
What is going on? But it was but now I think that, looking back onto that situation, I'm very happy that I had it because now, like you said, I also understand. I know what it feels like. I know that this is a bad way to put it, but it's true. I know that shame of going, everybody thinks I'm this. Everybody thinks I'm successful. Everybody thinks I'm amazing. So everybody's assuming that I'm making money hand over fist and I'm a fraud.
Exactly.
Right? Of having those feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing is change is painful. Change you have to go through. And sometimes it's not as simple as a lot of coaches and a lot of people put out there of, as if it's just flipping a switch.
Right.
Just do it, just, buckle down or whatever the hell they'll tell you, because sometimes it's not that easy to do because of subconscious thinking and because of limiting beliefs that have been there a lot longer than maybe that coach has in your life. So, understanding and recognizing, to your point, recognizing where your fault is, recognizing the trends of the stuff that you keep doing. I know damn well I like to self-sabotage, it's nobody's business, I'll have a success and then I'll be like, oh shit, run away. That's my thing that I'm working on. Which maybe people don't don't see that on the outside. But, my podcast launched, it did really well. And I wanted to like crawl in a hole because that's my shit to deal with. But, and I think also everybody has it, period. I don't care if you see the most powerful coach, the most biggest millionaire. I don't give a shit. Everybody has the self-talk going through their head. Some are just better at managing it than others. So I think people need to take a little bit of notice of that too, so they feel a little less alone as well on like the crazy journey that they're on.
Well, and I think that's an important thing to realize too, is that for a lot of these, moguls or whoever it is that you're looking up to, like you said, they have their own crap that they're also
Exactly.
trying to deal
Yeah.
with and, trying to manage. And that's not, I think, understanding that that is not something that's ever going to go away.
No, it's not.
It's just going to change, or it's going to be dressed differently, or it's going to appear differently, but it's always going to be there on some level. And it's always going to be something that you have to, overcome.
Exactly.
But I think
Yes.
too, some of the things that, that people might be struggling with is, the thought, I know I need to change, but how do I know if I'm actually ready to do it? Because like you said, you have to be ready. But then I think, how do people understand, am I actually ready to make these changes? Or am I just saying I need to change because I'm looking out and saying something needs to happen?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how high is the pain level.
Right.
I mean, there's the story about, what is it? A guy walks by a dog down, like as he's going down the street, and the dog is sitting on a nail, and he just looks at the dog's owner. He says, well, why doesn't he move? And the owner says, well, because it's either the discomfort of sitting on the nail or the discomfort of ripping his body off, so it depends on, is the pain threshold high enough that you want to change at that point? And I think I'm taking a class right now, and it's mainly on money mindset, but it talks a lot about the brain, and it's really interesting. And it says, like, if you want to stay the same, that's fine too, but at least make it a conscious choice to stay the same, because that's your mind's way of kind of protecting you and saying, its entire job is to keep you safe, right? Don't get yourself out of the tribe, stay safe from the lions, like all of that primitive thinking stuff. And that's okay. But at least get to the point where it is a conscious choice to stay the same. And I think that's where people fall flat, because they don't even look. They're like, if I don't look, I won't see it, and therefore I don't have to change it. But
Well,
if
not,
you
and I
look
think,
at it,
I think not realizing that, I love what you said about making sure that it's a choice, not
yes,
I'm here because I'm stuck here. I'm here because
yes,
I'm choosing to be
exactly.
here for a little bit.
Exactly. Because you are in charge no matter what. I mean, and we all blame different things, right? Like, I have kids, I can't do this, or I have this, I can't do that. Yeah. And those are circumstances. And I don't want to minimize the situations at all or your feelings around them. However, you are the one in control. You are the one in control. And oftentimes we deflect to external things instead of looking inside and saying, okay, what about me is keeping me here? And not, oh, well, it must be my chapter of life, or it must be this, or it must be that. And I'm not saying that you don't factor those in, because you have to on some level, but the first step of reflection needs to be internal and not external.
Yeah. So much good stuff.
Oh,
I feel
good.
like I could
Good.
just chat with you forever. So
Thanks. Me too.
so
Ditto.
if someone is sitting there and they're like, okay, I don't really like, they're just sort of on the fence, or they're just unsure, or they don't even know if what, like, where do I go from here?
Yeah.
Are these services that I need? You have like a free coaching session that you're offering. So, but tell people like what that is. Like if they're looking for
Yeah.
that, I don't want people just being like, yeah, free, sign me up.
Right, exactly, which people do, and that's fine. I mean, my whole point is to give value no matter what, right? So you'll go into that session with me, and you will leave with some sort of resource that will help you, because I don't ever want to take anybody on as a client that I don't think I can help, or who is not ready to help, or who maybe I'm just not a good fit for personality wise. Who knows? So either way, when you go in there into that session, we talk about what's your current state, because I'm a big fan of doing like a current state analysis and then moving you to your ideal state. That's kind of the premise behind coaching. So, we sit there and we go through it in that first session. And then, I mean, I'm pretty bluntly honest. Like I don't like to sugarcoat things, because I don't think that's fair for folks either. But when they get in there, like I said, you will leave with something helpful. and maybe it is my services that I'm going to offer you, but maybe it's a great resource that I have, or maybe it's, some insight that you didn't see. My goal in that session is to give you the best experience, free or paid or whatever, so that you can at least walk away with some sort of value added.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't add on to this. So I want you to tell us a little bit about why you started the podcast and then what you're celebrating with that. Because now I'm just going to force you to celebrate something.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So I went back and forth, podcast was on my roadmap for 2020, and then the actual 2020 hit. And I was like, oh shit. So I went back and forth on what I wanted the podcast to be about. And one of the things that I kind of live my life around is, people telling stories, and my company at its core is called Create Honesty, so that people will talk about things so that other people feel a little less alone on their journey, right? Because I think we're all thinking things, but only sometimes it takes somebody to say it. So the Resilient Entrepreneur podcast kind of came out of that. It came out of, I'd been through the fire a lot, and I know other people had too. And I know there were other people who were living in like shame closets where like, I'd been through the fire, but I don't think I'm normal, whatever that looks like. So I wanted to have a lot of conversations that would help people in their businesses, obviously, but would also help them as humans to function, because entrepreneurship is fucking hard. Like mentally, it's hard. So, understanding that they're all different people dealing with it, and that doesn't minimize what you're going through, but it should make you at least feel a little less alone with that. And I've had some really amazing guests, and I've been really fortunate. We just hit the 50th episode, and, I don't even know, 8,000 or something crazy downloads. And we hit number 15 on the iTunes chart when I launched. So it's been a really great blessing, but mostly for me, I get to talk to really cool people. Like, that's really great for me, and just hear about amazing people's stories, which is even better.
So in your, business journey, sort of looking back over everything that you've done, and I know that there's going to be a lot, but what's one thing that you were like, this is what I want someone else to know, because I wish I would have known this?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question.
It's such a hard one.
There's like 50 million things in my head right now. I think first and foremost is you need to find your people. And I think coming out of the gate, I was kind of like, I'm going to do this, and I don't need help. I got this, right? You don't got it. Let me just tell you right now, you don't got it. Not without your people. So, find those people who, like we were talking about earlier, can help you, because I tried it and I failed miserably, where it was a matter of like, I can do it all, be it all, have it all. No, the day I outsourced stuff was my like happy dance day, because I released, and I can actually grow that way. Or the day that I, leaned on girlfriends who were in a similar position. There's something to be said about having those relationships without judgment, that I really want everybody to know that you need to do on this.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's perfect. So if someone's out there and they're like, hey, that's it, I want Michelle to be my people. What's the best way for them to find all about you?
Yeah. So, you can go to the website, which is createhonesty.com. I'm also Create Honesty on Facebook and Instagram. You can search my name on LinkedIn. The Resilient Entrepreneur podcast is on all your typical podcast platforms. And then I also have a Facebook group called the Surviving Entrepreneurship Community that you can also find.
And tell us a little bit about that group, because I think that'll be a great resource for listeners too.
Yeah. Number one, I drop a lot of like the freebies from the guests. Like if somebody comes on my show and they have a freebie or something like that, or a great resource, it goes in that group. So that's definitely a bonus to get your butt in there. But then I'm also dropping a lot of resources in there, and tips and motivation, and just, good stuff to help you, because again, like the shit's hard. Like, why not help each other at it? Right.
Yeah. And I love that, I love that it's not like an added cost to something. Like it's because I think there's so much stuff that's out there, right? That people are like, there's just too many things in too many places. So this is just like a one-stop place that you can go and maybe even find your people.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, it's a smaller group, but I kind of like it that way because
Mhm.
I don't want anybody to feel like they're lost in a sea of like 10,000 people
Right.
either. So I kind of like it that it's smaller as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much for imparting all of your wisdom on us
Yeah,
today. It was an absolute pleasure.
of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the conversation that we've had today.
For more ways that you can connect with Michelle, head to our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca. Click on blogs on the left-hand side. You'll see this episode and all of the links that you can connect with Michelle, her community, and a few other special things that she has that are going to give you the edge up to have a resilient journey. Also, you will find a link to get a free coaching session if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what her private coaching could do for your business and for yourself to get to the next level and make your dreams a reality. As always, Foxy listener, I would love if you are already subscribed, if you could leave us a review on wherever your favorite avenue is to listen to us. Don't forget, if you would like to put a face to the name, you can find all of our podcast episodes on our YouTube channel at Fox Talks Business. We would love to see you there and hear your comments as well. So no matter what you're doing today, whether you're just trying to make it through or whether you are crushing it, remember to take some time to have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?